At 52, I felt reborn. I had always sensed a deep attraction to black men, perhaps due to their confident demeanor, the richness of their voices, and the strength and gentleness of their hands. For years, I suppressed this desire, hiding it behind polite smiles and Sunday dinners. I played my roles well: the devoted wife, the perfect neighbor, the woman who seemed to have everything. But beneath the surface, a fire burned, a restless longing I couldn't even name. My husband, Robert, was a good man, solid, dependable, the kind who believed in hard work, saving money, and mowing the lawn every Saturday morning. We had a good life in our small Texas town, the kind that looked perfect from the outside. But at night, lying next to Robert, I often felt like a ghost. Then he moved in across the street into the old Miller house that had been empty for almost a year. His name was Darius Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, with skin that gleamed like deep bronze under the Texas sun. The first time I saw him shirtless, washing his car on a hot July afternoon, something inside me shifted. It was like a long-forgotten part of me cracked open, gasping for air. And right then, I knew my life was about to change forever. If you've ever felt a hidden fire inside you, a longing you thought you'd buried long ago, stay with me. Because what happened next isn't just a story. It's a reminder that sometimes the life we think we've built can crumble in the blink of an eye. The day we truly met, the heat was unforgiving. It was one of those Texas afternoons where the air feels thick enough to drink, and the sun beats down so hard you can hear the cicadas scream. I had promised myself I would stay inside, but fate, or maybe something stronger, pulled me to the front porch. There he was, Darius Carter, bare-chested again, sweat glistening across his broad shoulders as he leaned over the hood of his truck, muscles flexing with every slow, deliberate movement. I stood there for a moment, longer than I should have, watching him. I told myself it was innocent, neighborly curiosity, nothing more. But my heart thudded wildly against my ribs, betraying me, summoning a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I walked down the steps, crossing the narrow strip of grass between our houses. "Hey there," I called, keeping my voice as light and casual as I could. He looked up, and for a moment, the world narrowed to nothing but the space between his dark eyes and mine. "Well, hello," he said, wiping his hands on a rag and giving me a slow, dangerous smile. "You must be my neighbor." His voice was deep, a rich, velvety sound that seemed to hum in the heavy air. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly aware of how my sundress clung to my skin, damp from the heat. "Emily Parker," I said, offering my hand. He took it in his large, warm, calloused hand and held it just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Darius Carter," he said. And there was something in the way he said my name, slow, deliberate, that made the base of my spine tingle. For a moment, we just stood there, locked in some unspoken understanding, the kind that says everything without a single word being uttered. I should have stepped back then. I should have made an excuse, hurried inside, locked the door. But instead, I smiled. And God help me, I stayed. After that first meeting, it was like the universe kept conspiring to throw us together. Everywhere I turned, there he was. Some days I found him working on his truck, his shirt peeled off, jeans riding low on his hips. Other times, he was out in the yard watering the patchy grass, sweat making his skin glisten in the harsh Texas sun. And me, I found reasons, ridiculous, flimsy excuses to be outside, watering my hydrangeas even though the ground was already soaked, checking the mailbox 3 times a day, even when I knew it was empty, walking my old Labrador around the block, even when the heat was thick enough to choke on, just to catch a glimpse. Sometimes it was just a nod, a half smile. Other times it was more a brush of fingers when he handed me a dropped newspaper, a lingering glance that felt like it stripped me bare under my sundress. Once, as I rounded the corner of my driveway, lost in thought, I nearly collided with him head on. His hands caught my arms, large, firm, steadying me before I could stumble. "Careful there, Emily," he said, his voice low, almost teasing. I looked up into his eyes, deep, dark, endless, and for one breathless second neither of us moved. His hand stayed on me a moment longer than necessary, the heat of his palms searing through the thin fabric of my blouse. I could feel my pulse thrumming in my ears, feel the flush crawling up my neck. I mumbled something, I don't even remember what, and hurried back into the house, heart hammering, knees weak. That night, lying in bed next to Robert, I still felt the phantom imprint of Darius's hands on my arms, still heard the low rumble of his voice in my ear. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes and smiled. Robert had barely pulled out of the driveway when the wave of excitement washed over me. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was hunger. The kind of hunger that had lived buried inside me for far too long. I stepped outside, pretending to check the mailbox, even though there was nothing there. And there he was, Darius, bare-chested once again, washing his truck, water dripping down the ridges of his muscles, glinting in the golden light, as if he had been waiting for me. "Need a hand with that?" I called out, my voice catching just slightly in my throat. He looked up, that dangerous smile curling his lips. "You offering?" he said, tossing the sponge into the bucket and walking toward me, water still clinging to his skin. I laughed. Breathless, reckless. "I don't think I'd be much help." "You'd be surprised," he said, his voice low, wrapping around me like velvet. "You want to come in for a drink?" We both knew it wasn't about the drink, but I nodded anyway. And just like that, I followed him inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, the air between us crackled. Thick, electric, inevitable. "You've been teasing me for days," Darius murmured, stepping closer, his hands slipping into the curve of my waist as if they had always belonged there. "Tell me you don't want this," he whispered against my ear. I couldn't. I didn't even try. Instead, I leaned into him, offering my mouth, my body, my long-starved soul. His lips crashed into mine, hot, demanding, pulling a gasp from deep inside me. His hands roamed my body with a reverence that felt almost sacred, tracing the forgotten curves of a woman who had waited too long to be touched like this. I clung to him, fingers digging into his back as he lifted me effortlessly, pressing me against the wall. The world spun around us, colors blurring, time dissolving into a haze of heat and sensation. Every kiss, every caress, every whisper against my skin peeled away the years of loneliness I had tried so hard to ignore. When he finally took me, right there against the wall, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and longing, it wasn't just about bodies meeting. It was about souls colliding, about rediscovering parts of myself I had thought were gone forever. Long after our bodies stilled, after the tremors of release faded into soft, gasping breaths, I lay in his arms, feeling more alive than I had in decades. And in the quiet that followed, one truth settled deep into my bones. There was no going back now. After that first night, we couldn't stop. We didn't even try. Every chance we had, every sliver of opportunity, we took it. Hungry and reckless, like two people who had been starved for too long. Sometimes it was in the shadowed corner of his living room, the blinds half closed against the scorching sun. Other times it was in my kitchen, my back pressed against the cold marble counter, his hand sliding up under my sundress. Mornings, afternoons, stolen moments in between errands. Every encounter burned hotter than the last, leaving us both breathless and trembling. There was no shyness anymore, no hesitation. It was raw, unapologetic. Darius would find me in the hallway, by the front door, in the backyard, and pull me into him like a man possessed. Every kiss was a battle we both surrendered to, every touch a spark that ignited into wildfire. The first time he took me on the stairs, halfway between the first and second floor. It was so sudden, so desperate, that I barely had time to gasp before he was lifting me, pressing me against the wall, claiming me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. We couldn't get enough of each other. Even when our bodies were exhausted, when our skin was slick with sweat and our muscles ached from overuse, the hunger never faded. If anything, it grew sharper, more dangerous, and through it all, the thrill of secrecy wrapped around us like a second skin. The knowledge that just across the street, Robert was none the wiser, the perfect husband in the perfect house, completely unaware that his wife was losing herself more and more every day. I should have felt guilt. I should have felt shame. Instead, all I felt was alive, more alive than I had in my entire life. After that first night, we couldn't stop. We didn't even try. Every chance we had, every sliver of opportunity, we took it. Hungry and reckless, like two people who had been starved for too long. Sometimes it was in the shadowed corner of his living room, the blinds half closed against the scorching sun. Other times it was in my kitchen, my back pressed against the cold marble counter, his hand sliding up under my sundress. Mornings, afternoons, stolen moments in between errands. Every encounter burned hotter than the last, leaving us both breathless and trembling. There was no shyness anymore, no hesitation. It was raw, unapologetic. Darius would find me in the hallway, by the front door, in the backyard, and pull me into him like a man possessed. Every kiss was a battle we both surrendered to, every touch a spark that ignited into wildfire. The first time he took me on the stairs, halfway between the first and second floor, it was so sudden, so desperate, that I barely had time to gasp before he was lifting me, pressing me against the wall, claiming me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. We couldn't get enough of each other. Even when our bodies were exhausted, when our skin was slick with sweat and our muscles ached from overuse, the hunger never faded. If anything, it grew sharper, more dangerous, and through it all, the thrill of secrecy wrapped around us like a second skin. The knowledge that just across the street, Robert was none the wiser. The perfect husband in the perfect house, completely unaware that his wife was losing herself more and more every day. I should have felt guilt. I should have felt shame. Instead, all I felt was alive, more alive than I had in my entire life. It started with a whisper, lying tangled together in the afterglow. Darius's voice slid into my ear like silk. "Why are you still with him, Emily?" he asked, tracing lazy circles along my hip. You deserve more. I laughed weakly, brushing off the ache those words stirred inside me. But he didn't let it go. You're wasting your life, he said. You could have it all. The house, the money, freedom. I turned to face him, searching his eyes for a hint of a joke. But there was none. What if? He said, his voice low and steady. We made it happen. My heart thudded against my ribs. Fear, excitement, temptation. It was madness, immoral, unthinkable. And yet, a small, wicked part of me whispered back, why not? The plan wasn't just about moving money around. It had to be smarter than that, subtler. At first, I convinced Robert to open a joint credit card for emergencies. I made a show of responsibility, setting up automatic payments, checking balances. He trusted me completely. Then came the spending. Small at first, groceries, house repairs, then bigger. Boutique clothes, spa treatments, weekend trips to relieve my stress. Always justifiable, always slipping under his radar. Darius taught me how to manipulate the statements. I diverted some bills to a P.O. box he set up, delayed payments just enough to rack up late fees, watched the interest rate soar. Robert barely noticed. Too busy, too stressed. Every time he voiced concern, I reassured him, offered to take care of it, made him feel guilty for not trusting me. When the first debt notices started arriving, I acted surprised, even cried. It must be a mistake, I said, trembling hands holding the overdue letters. I'll fix it, I promise. Meanwhile, behind his back, Darius and I were draining the savings account. Transfer by transfer, hidden beneath layers of paperwork and forged signatures. By the time Robert realized the mortgage was 3 months overdue, that our accounts were bleeding dry, it was too late. The damage was done. He was drowning financially, emotionally, and I stood at the edge of the water watching him sink. Robert didn't leave immediately. At first, he tried to fight. He made frantic calls to the bank, begged for extensions, maxed out his last credit card just to cover the mortgage for another month. I watched silently as he struggled day after day, the weight of it all crushing him from the inside out. And I played my part perfectly, supportive on the surface, quietly urging him to maybe think about a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere far from the wreckage. You deserve peace, Robert, I whispered one night, my hand on his arm, my voice trembling with a fake emotion. Maybe it's time to let go. He resisted at first. Of course he did. But in the end, the debt, the shame, the exhaustion broke him down. One grey morning, he packed a single suitcase. I need to go, he said hoarsely, not meeting my eyes. I can't breathe here anymore. I stood at the window as he drove away, shrinking smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror of my new life. And behind me, Darius was already waiting to claim everything we'd stolen. But paradise was never built to last. Not when it was built on ruins. It started with whispers, late-night phone calls, messages he wouldn't show me. Nights when he slipped out of bed claiming business that couldn't wait. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia. But deep down, the old sharp instinct twisted in my gut. He's hiding something. One night, I followed him. My heart pounded as I trailed his truck through the dark, dusty streets of our little town. He parked behind a cheap motel on the edge of town. I watched, frozen in the shadows, as he got out, and then she appeared. Young, pretty, everything I used to be. She laughed as he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close like he used to hold me. I saw him kiss her, deep, hungry, the same way he once kissed me against our kitchen counter, against the walls of our stolen home. I stood there, the night air thick and suffocating, watching the man I destroyed my life for destroy me in return. And in that moment, all the lies, all the betrayals, all the blood I had spilled to build my new life came crashing down. I wasn't special. I was just another step on his way to something, someone better. The rage inside me burned hotter than anything I had ever felt. And I knew this wasn't over. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. Instead, I waited, silent, watching, because the house, the accounts, the papers, they were all still under my name. The next morning, while Darius was still asleep, I changed the locks, called the bank, cut him off from everything. When he stumbled back to the door later that day, confused and furious, I met him with a cold, steady smile. "It's over, Darius," I said. "You got what you wanted. Now get out." He raged. He threatened. But I stood my ground. Because in the end, he had taught me well. Trust no one. Love no one. And most of all, never let anyone hold the power to destroy you. He left eventually, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The same smugness wiped clean from his face. I had the house, the money, my freedom. But as I stood in the silence of my victory, staring at the empty halls of the life I had once dreamed of, I realized I had won. But I had lost everything that ever mattered. Sometimes the price of betrayal isn't just losing what you have. It's losing who you are. They say some moments in life sneak up on you, not with a bang, but with a whisper. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sun spills lazily across the kitchen floor, and the whole house feels like it's holding its breath. Edward was at the clinic. The housekeeper had left early. I had just finished a call with the vineyard manager when I noticed the laundry basket by the stairs. Caleb's laundry. He always forgot. That boy, 22, but somehow still so absent-minded. I didn't mind. Felt good to do little things for him. A way to stay close. I took the basket to the laundry room and began folding, humming softly to myself. His clothes smelled like cedar and something vaguely citrusy. His shampoo, probably. My hands worked without thinking until they reached a pair of navy sweatpants crumpled at the bottom. That's when it happened. At first, it was just a ridge beneath the fabric. My thumb brushed along it absently, a seam, a cord. But the weight, the shape, it was unmistakable. My breath caught. I froze. My fingers hovered for a second longer than they should have. Long enough for my cheeks to flush, long enough for something deep within me to stir, a pulse I hadn't felt in years. I dropped the pants like they had burned me, backing away from the counter. But it was too late. The image had already been burned into my mind, thick, heavy, wrong. My heart was pounding so loud, I half expected Caleb to walk in and ask if I was all right. I would have told him I was fine, but I wasn't. And that moment, that one tiny accident, would become the first stone in an avalanche I never saw coming. On paper, my life looked enviable. A sprawling home nestled in the rolling vineyards of Napa Valley. Rose bushes lined the winding driveway. The scent of lavender drifted through open windows in the spring. Every room bathed in golden light with high ceilings and handcrafted wood beams that whispered of old money and timeless elegance. I was 48, married for nearly 2 decades to Edward Hartwell, a well-respected cardiologist, the kind of man who was always shaking hands, remembered names at charity dinners, and never raised his voice. People often said we were lucky that we had it all, and I suppose in a way we did. But what no one saw was the silence behind those grand oak doors. The way his touch had become clinical, obligatory, a hand on my back at parties, a peck on the cheek before bed. I used to measure love in the heat of a gaze, the press of a hand at the small of my back. Now it felt like Edward saw through me, not into me. We slept in the same bed, but it might as well have been miles wide. I once joked that I was starting to feel like a dress on display, elegant, well kept, but behind glass, never worn, never touched. Edward chuckled at the time. I don't think he realized I wasn't entirely joking. And then there was Caleb. He wasn't ours by blood. Edward's best friend and his wife had died in a car crash when Caleb was 16. We took him in without hesitation. He'd been quiet back then, withdrawn, broken, but over the years he grew into something striking. Tall, thoughtful, with a quiet strength that lingered in the way he carried himself. At 23, he was finishing college, still living at home while he saved for grad school. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching him, too long at dinner, noticing the sharpness of his jawline, the way his eyes didn't flinch when he spoke. It wasn't desire. Not yet. At least that's what I told myself. For most of his teenage years, Caleb called me Eve, not Mom. Though people often mistook me for his mother at school events or around town, I never corrected them. In some ways, I liked it. It made things simpler. It made things feel real. From the day we took him in, I loved him the way a woman loves a child who has lost everything. I cooked his favorite meals, reminded him to take his allergy meds, kissed his forehead when he left for school. I watched over him, not just out of obligation, but out of something deeper. A bond that formed in silence, in grief, in shared space. But something began to change. It wasn't sudden, came quietly, the way seasons shift before you notice the leaves falling. His voice deepened, his shoulders broadened, the softness of boyhood replaced by something sharper, more solid. Girls started calling. At first he'd shrug them off, then he stopped mentioning them altogether. He grew quieter, more distant. Not cold, just guarded like he was carrying something too heavy for his age. I tried asking gently, "Everything okay?" He always nodded. "Just tired." But his eyes said otherwise. Then somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing a boy I had raised and started noticing the man he was becoming. It scared me, if I'm being honest. Not because of what it meant about him, but because of what it revealed about me. I found myself wondering about him in moments I shouldn't, watching the way he ran a hand through his hair, or how he stood barefoot at the sink, drinking orange juice straight from the bottle. And I felt things. Not full-blown desire, not yet, but flickers, strange, persistent, like the glowing embers of a fire I thought had long gone out. I told myself it was nothing. But when you're lonely for too long, even a spark can feel like salvation. It started as a whisper, a flicker of something I couldn't name at first. A flutter in my stomach, a pause in my breath, a flush that crept into my cheeks for no good reason at all. And then came the guilt, swift, heavy, because I knew what those feelings meant. Even if I refused to say them out loud, I wasn't supposed to notice him that way. Not Caleb, not the boy I helped raise, not the young man who called our house his home, who left his shoes by the door, who still used the same coffee mug he had since he was 16. I told myself it was a passing thing. hormones, loneliness, maybe even grief. That strange kind that creeps up on you after years of pretending everything's fine. But it didn't pass. It rooted itself inside me quietly, stubbornly. I would watch him laugh at something on his phone. The way the corners of his eyes crinkled, and I'd feel it. This awful, wonderful warmth blooming in my chest. I hated it. I craved it. I hated that I craved it, and that terrified me because every fiber of my being told me to walk away, to shut it down, to protect him, to protect myself. But I didn't. I lingered. I let it grow. I let it change me. And every night, as I lay in bed beside a man who hadn't touched me in months, I heard the same sentence in my head, soft as a prayer and sharp as a blade. I should have walked away, but I didn't. The house was quiet that night. Edward was away at a conference in San Diego, and the wind outside whispered through the vineyards like a lullaby. I had poured myself a half glass of wine, just enough to take the edge off the silence. When I heard the water running upstairs, it was nearly midnight. I assumed Caleb had already gone to bed. But the hum of the shower filled the upper hallway, soft and steady. As I reached the landing, I noticed the bathroom door wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar. A thin ribbon of steam curled through the crack. I should have turned back. I know that now, but something stopped me. I stepped closer, barefoot on the cool hardwood, the wine glass still in my hand. I wasn't trying to spy. I told myself, just making sure everything was all right. But then I saw him through the foggy mirror. His figure came into focus. Caleb stood under the spray, water cascading down his back. His shoulders were tense. One hand braced against the tile. The other moved with slow, frustrated urgency. His head was bowed, lips parted, breath catching in his throat. I froze. I didn't mean to watch, but I did. Not for long, just long enough for something inside me to twist, to ache, and then, as if pulled by instinct alone, he looked up. Our eyes met through the fogged glass. Neither of us moved. Not at first. His expression shifted. Confusion, then realization, then something else I couldn't name. Couldn't breathe. I didn't run. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. Seconds passed, stretched thin and taut. Then he said my name, soft, disbelieving. Claire. It shattered something in me. I stepped back slowly, not saying a word, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. I told myself later that it was nothing, just a glance, a mistake. But that moment, those few seconds in the steam and silence, was when everything began to unravel. He came to me the next evening. The house was dim, shadows stretching across the kitchen walls as the sun dipped behind the hills. I was rinsing out a wine glass when I heard his footsteps. Quiet, hesitant. Claire. I turned, towel in hand. Hey, everything all right? He nodded, then shook his head. Can I talk to you about something weird? I dried my hand slowly. Of course. He hesitated, running a palm down the back of his neck. It's about me, about why things don't work with girls. My heart skipped. I think I'm too big, he said, eyes fixed on the floor. Like down there, it scares people off. The words hung between us, thick and raw. He looked up then. His expression wasn't proud or playful. It was vulnerable, ashamed. I've tried to, figure it out. But it hurts. And I don't know what's wrong with me. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. Caleb, nothing's wrong with you. He didn't look convinced. I reached into the drawer and pulled out a small bottle. old, tucked away behind dish towels. Here, I said gently, holding it out. This might help. He took it slowly. Our fingers brushed. That's when it happened. The shift. The silence grew heavier. His hand lingered on mine. Our eyes locked. I don't know how to use it, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Can you show me? My breath caught. There was a beat. A moment suspended in time where I could have said no. Where I should have said no, but I didn't. I stepped closer. His lips found mine before I could speak. Gentle at first, then desperate. My towel slipped from my shoulder. His hand caught it, then moved to my back. We didn't stop. We didn't speak. We simply let it happen. And in that kitchen, between soft lamplight and unspoken need, something inside both of us broke loose. First, we didn't talk about it. We returned to our routines, moving through the house like nothing had happened. But something had. Everything had. I could feel it in the way Caleb looked at me longer, deeper. Not with lust, but with something gentler. Something dangerous. He started texting more, asking where I was, when I'd be home. I told myself it was harmless, that it was still private, contained. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. One afternoon, Edward took me out for lunch, a rare gesture. We sat on the patio of a small cafe in town, and I almost managed to forget until I came home to Caleb pacing the kitchen, jaw tight, eyes stormy. How was lunch? He asked, voice low. Nice, I said cautiously. Why? He shrugged. But the tension in his shoulders said everything. Just wondering what he's doing taking you out all of a sudden. I blinked. Caleb, he's my husband. He laughed, sharp, bitter. Yeah, and I'm the one who actually sees you. I didn't know what to say because part of me wanted to be angry, and part of me was flattered. That night he came to my room, not for sex, not for heat, but for closeness. He curled up beside me, head on my shoulder, hand resting lightly on my stomach. I think I'm falling in love with you, he whispered into the dark. And I froze because I wasn't. I cared for him deeply, but not like that. Not in a way that could survive the daylight. He wanted more. I only wanted to feel wanted. And suddenly, I realized I had opened a door I didn't know how to close. I had awoken something in him. Not a boy, not a fling, but a man who loved, who claimed, who needed. And I couldn't give him what he was asking for. I didn't know how to stop what we'd started. And worse, I didn't want to. It started with a receipt. Edward was cleaning out his briefcase when he found it. A hotel charge from a Marriott downtown. The date matched a night he'd been out of town. The name on the reservation wasn't mine. It was Caleb's. He brought it to dinner, sliding the slip of paper across the table like it was nothing more than a napkin. Any idea why Caleb's using our card for a hotel? Caleb's fork clattered to his plate. I felt my stomach flip. Probably meeting someone, Caleb said too quickly. Didn't want to bring her here. Edward didn't blink. Mind showing me your phone? Caleb froze, then stood. I'm not doing this. He stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the chandelier. Edward turned to me slowly. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Claire, is there something I should know? I wanted to lie. God, I wanted to lie. But the silence between us had grown too loud to ignore. And then he said something that shattered what was left of me. I checked the cameras, the ones outside the guest wing, the hallway, the corner near the wine cellar. I saw the way you looked at him, Edward continued. At 2 o'clock in the morning. What was that, Claire? I couldn't speak, so I nodded once. And with that, everything collapsed. He didn't scream, didn't cry. He simply got up, walked to his office, and came back with a folder. Inside, divorce papers. He placed them gently on the table along with a pen. Signed them. Don't contact me again. Then he left the room. I sat there for a long time, hands trembling, unable to breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. Some betrayals don't come with slamming doors. Some are silent. Some just end with a pen and a signature, and a name you'll never be allowed to say out loud again. Caleb disappeared the night Edward handed me the divorce papers. No note, no call, just gone. His room stayed untouched for weeks. His toothbrush still in the holder, a half-finished energy drink on his desk. I'd sit at the edge of his bed some nights, hoping to hear the creak of the front door, the soft thud of his footsteps on the stairs. But he never came back. Months passed. Then one sleepless night, my phone buzzed with a Google alert I'd forgotten I'd set up. Jay Hartwell arrested for DUI in Nevada. I stared at the screen for a long time. His mugshot didn't look like him. Bruised eyes, a cut lip, a hollow in his cheeks that hadn't been there before. I bailed him out. He didn't thank me, didn't hug me. He just asked flatly, "Why are you here?" "Because no one else is," I whispered. He laughed, dry, broken. "You don't get to play mum now." He took the bus ticket I offered, took the cash, never looked back. That was the last time I saw him. As for Edward, he erased me like a line of chalk on a blackboard. No screaming, no lawyers, just a signed envelope slid under my motel room door. Finalized, don't contact me again. And so I became Susan. I moved 3 towns over. Found work at a gas station off I-80. Nights were easier. Fewer people, fewer questions. I wore no makeup. Cut my hair short. Nobody here knew who I was. And that was the only mercy I had left. Sometimes in the quiet of 2 a.m., I think about the woman I used to be. The woman in the vineyard house in silk robes and summer light. The woman who had a name worth remembering. Now I'm just someone who made a choice and never stopped paying for it. Some doors once opened can never be closed. We tell ourselves it was just a moment, just a look, just one bad night. But the truth is, moments have weight. They leave marks and sometimes they change everything. People ask if I regret it, as if regret is some kind of redemption. The truth, I don't know. I miss Caleb's laugh. I miss the way Edward used to hum when he shaved. I miss the sound of clinking wine glasses in the kitchen and the soft rustle of bedsheets before sleep. But mostly, I miss who I was before all of this. Before the glances lingered too long, before the line blurred. Before I let myself believe I could rewrite the rules without paying the price. The thing about ruin is it doesn't care if you meant well. It doesn't care if you were lonely. It doesn't even care if you didn't know how to stop. Just ruins takes everything, and then it waits to see what's left of you after. Some mistakes don't teach you anything except how to live with them. Some punishments aren't loud. They're slow, quiet, and permanent. And in the end, no matter how many times you replay the moment in your mind, no matter how many what-ifs you gather, the truth stands still. You chose, and now, so must I. So here I am, Susan, working nights, pouring coffee for passing truckers, pretending my hands don't shake when I remember how it all felt. Bright, wrong, intoxicating. If you were me, Would you have walked away before it was too late? Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever stood at the edge of something forbidden? Have you witnessed a story like this before? Would you dare to share it? Because sometimes the most powerful confessions are the ones we whisper in the dark.